My name is Miles. I'm 25, living in a quiet apartment complex just outside Seattle, in Washington state. I moved here not long ago, trading the chaos of a noisy downtown rental for a peaceful spot where I could finally hear my own thoughts. I work in a logistics warehouse, loading boxes and checking inventory, a physical job that covers the rent on my one-bedroom place. Life's straightforward for me. Black coffee in the morning, Netflix at night, and weekend jogs in the nearby park. I'm not chasing anything big. No girlfriend, no drama, just a fresh start after too many late nights dodging rowdy neighbors and impossible roommates. The apartment next to mine is always so still. I catch glimpses of its tenant now and then. A woman who's always put together, like she's heading to a business meeting, even on weekends. We nod in the elevator, exchange a quick hey in the hallway. That's it. I don't even know her name. Her place is dead silent. No music, no TV, no footsteps. It's like she's never there, which suits me fine. I crave the quiet. But that night, everything shifted. I was sprawled on my couch, half watching a crime show with the volume low, just enough to hear the rain pounding the windows. Seattle rains endlessly, but that evening, it was fiercer, a relentless downpour that shrank the world. I was about to head to bed when a dull thud came through the wall we share. It was sharp, like something heavy hitting the floor. I paused the TV, figuring maybe a chair tipped over, or a box fell from a shelf. Mice, perhaps the building's old after all. Then it happened again. Louder, more deliberate, like a fist against the wall. My heart raced. I sat up, listening hard. Silence. Then a third sound, a muffled crash, like a body collapsing. My stomach twisted. This wasn't furniture. I grabbed my phone and stood, socks slipping on the hardwood as I moved to the wall. I pressed my ear against it, holding my breath. Nothing but the rain outside. I told myself it was probably nothing, that I was overreacting, but my gut wouldn't let go. I slipped on my shoes, stepped into the hall, and knocked on her door. "Hello?" I called, louder than I meant. No answer. I knocked harder. "Everything okay in there?" Still nothing. I glanced under the door. A flickering light, like a lamp switching on and off. My pulse hammered. I tried the knob, locked, of course. I pounded once more, hard enough to wake half the floor. Silence. I don't know what came over me. Maybe that endless blinking light, or the echo of that heavy, unnatural thud. I thought about calling emergency services, but what would I say? I heard a noise? Instead, I stepped back, took a deep breath, and slammed my shoulder into the door. The lock was rusty, the wood cheap. It gave on the second hit, splintering at the frame. I stumbled inside, breathless, fumbling for the light switch. The room glowed faintly from a toppled floor lamp, its bulb flickering like a dying star. And there she was, sprawled on the living room floor, one arm tucked under her, the other stretched out like she'd tried to catch herself. Her face was ashen, almost gray, her lips parted in a struggle for air. Her blouse was rumpled, soaked with sweat, and her hand trembled, clutching at nothing. I dropped to my knees beside her. Hey, can you hear me?" I said, my voice shaking. Her eyelids fluttered, her glassy eyes locking on mine, raw with something primal, fear, maybe, or despair. I didn't know her name, but I recognized her. The elevator woman, always so poised, now looking so small, so fragile. "I'm here," I whispered, trying to sound steady as I checked her pulse. It was faint, erratic. I pulled out my phone, fumbling to dial emergency services. "I need an ambulance," I told the operator, rattling off the address. "My neighbor's down. She's breathing, but it's bad. Hurry." She stirred, her fingers brushing my arm, weak, but insistent. Her voice was a hoarse whisper, barely there. "Don't leave me. I hate this feeling." Her words hit like a punch, heavy with layers beyond the moment. I squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not going anywhere. Help's on the way." The paramedics arrived minutes later, boots thudding as they took over. I stepped back, watching them check her vitals, load her onto a stretcher. One asked if I was family. "No, just her neighbor," I said, but as they wheeled her out, her eyes met mine for a split second, and I felt like more than that, even if I couldn't explain why. I followed the ambulance to the hospital, my jacket still damp from the rain, her words swirling in my head. Don't leave me. I didn't know her story, but I knew I couldn't walk away. Not yet. Sleep barely came that night. The hospital waiting room was brutally cold, that sterile chill seeping into your bones. I sat there for hours, jacket still wet, replaying the scene on a loop, her pale face, the way her hand clung to mine, that whispered plea not to be left alone. I had no idea why I stayed. She was a stranger, the woman next door. But those words, that look, they'd taken root in me. Eventually, a nurse came out and said she was stable but needed rest. You can visit tomorrow, she added. She's asking about the young man who brought her in. I drove home through the dark, the rain lighter now. Her broken door was propped with a chair from her hall, and I vowed to fix it later. My apartment felt too quiet. The TV was still paused on the show from when it all started. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, but sleep wouldn't come. Only her voice echoed, fragile yet fierce. I hate this feeling. The next morning, I stopped at a corner market for a bag of fruit apples, a few oranges, nothing fancy. It was the least I could do. The hospital was a short drive away, a gray concrete and glass block under Seattle's overcast sky. I found her room on the 3rd floor, door ajar. She was propped up in bed, an IV in her arm, dark hair in a loose bun. She looked better than the night before, less pale, but still drained, with deep shadows under her eyes like she hadn't slept either. The hospital gown couldn't hide her quiet poise, like she was holding herself together by will alone. "Hey," I said from the doorway, bag awkward in my hand. "Didn't know if you liked apples, but it's better than hospital food." Her eyes lifted, surprise, flickering maybe embarrassment. Then she smiled, a cautious curve of her lips. "You didn't have to," she replied, her voice steadier but soft. "But thanks, Miles, right?" "Yeah," I confirmed, stepping in. "And you're Sienna." I'd overheard her name from the paramedics' paperwork. I set the fruit on the bedside table, feeling out of place. "How are you feeling?" She shrugged, fingers smoothing the blanket's edge. "Better than last night. They say it was low blood pressure, dehydration. I'd had a fever for days and ignored it." She paused, gaze dropping to her hands. "I'm not used to needing help." I nodded, leaning against the wall. "Yeah, you don't strike me as the type to ask." I said it to lighten things, and it worked. She laughed softly, shoulders easing. "You owe me a new door, by the way," I added with a grin. "And maybe a few years off my life." "You scared the hell out of me." Her smile widened, but held a reserve, like she was weighing what to share. "I'll put it on my tab," she shot back. Then, quieter, testing the words, "I'd forgotten what it feels like to have someone show up for you. It's scarier than you'd think." Her words landed deep, echoing that moment on her floor when she'd begged me to stay. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, holding her gaze. "Yeah, well, breaking doors isn't my usual move, but I'm glad I did." A nurse bustled in then, checking Sienna's chart, and I took the cue to slip out. "Rest up," I said, heading for the door. "I'll check on your place. Make sure it's not flooding or anything." "Miles," she called as I crossed the threshold. I turned. Her expression softened, less guarded. "Thank you. Really." I gave a small wave and left, chest tight with something unnamed. On the drive home, her words about forgetting what it felt like to be seen looped in my mind. I didn't know her story, but I felt its weight, like she'd carried it alone for years. Later that day, I found a handyman to fix her door, a quick job with a new lock. I slipped the spare key under her mat for when she got back. The hospital called to say she'd be discharged soon, and a strange mix hit me. Relief and something like anticipation. I didn't really know Sienna, but she wasn't just the elevator woman anymore. She was someone who'd looked at me like I was the only thing keeping her from fading away, and I couldn't ignore that. A few days after Sienna's discharge, the rain hadn't let up. Seattle wrapped itself in it, a perpetual gray mist that made the city feel like it was holding its breath. I ran into her in the hall that morning, small duffel over her shoulder, steps slow but steady. She'd slipped back into her usual look, tailored black coat, hair in a neat ponytail, but a new weariness shadowed her eyes, or so it seemed to me. I nodded quickly. "Welcome back," I said, handing her the spare key from under the mat. She thanked me, voice polite but distant, like she was rebuilding the wall between us. It could have ended there. I'd done my part, broken the door, kept vigil at the hospital, secured her place. I could slide back into my routine, stay neighborly. But something from that night, her murmured plea for me not to leave, had hooked into me. I found myself listening for sounds from her side, glancing down the hall more than needed, waiting for another sign she wasn't okay. It started small. A couple days later, heading out for a jog, I saw her wrestling a too-heavy trash bag in the lobby. "Need a hand?" I called, closing in before she could say no. She hesitated, then nodded, lips tight like admitting weakness stung. I hauled it to the dumpster, and when I returned, she was still there, leaning in her doorway. "Thanks," she said, softer. "I'm not usually this useless." "You're not useless," I replied, shrugging. "Just human." She gave me a look, half amused, half skeptical, but didn't argue. From there, it snowballed. She started asking for little favors, always cautious, like she was testing me. Could I fix a stuck blind? Know how to swap a remote battery? One evening, she knocked with grocery bags, asking if I could carry them up, her arms still weak. Each time, her eyes lingered, searching, like she expected me to push back or vanish. I didn't. I showed up, and I watched her walls crack, bit by bit. One night, I brought a latte from the corner cafe. I'd noticed her ordering them in the elevator, so it felt safe. She opened the door, surprised, and took the cup with a raised brow. "You're making a habit of this," she said, but warmth edged her voice now. We sat at her kitchen counter, steam rising between us, talking about nothing and everything. Her interior design gig for fancy offices, my monotonous warehouse shifts. How Seattle's rain turned every day into an endless loop. "You don't talk like someone who hauls boxes for a living," she said at one point, head tilted, studying me. "You're thoughtful," I laughed, rubbing my neck. "Don't spread it around. I've got a reputation to uphold." But her words stuck. This wasn't small talk. She saw me, like I'd seen her that night on her floor. The more we talked, the more I glimpsed the cracks in her armor. Sienna was 42, solo since her divorce years back. No kids, no close family. She'd built a polished life on the surface, sleek apartment, thriving career, but she carried a quiet loneliness, like she'd learned to live with it without ever shaking it off. "After my ex," she said one evening, stirring her coffee, "I decided solitude was better. Fewer complications." She tossed it out lightly, but her eyes betrayed her, seeking mine like a challenge. I didn't bite. Instead, I said, "Complications aren't always bad. Sometimes they're just life." She held my gaze a long beat, then nodded, like I'd voiced something she'd forbidden herself to think for years. I started feeling the pull toward her. It wasn't just her looks, high cheekbones, dark eyes that seemed to read you through. It was her poise, strong yet brittle, like she guarded a secret not ready to spill. Leaving her place, I'd replay our talks. Her shy smiles, the softness in her voice when she let her guard down. I told myself I was just a good neighbor, reading too much into it. But late nights on my couch, I couldn't shake her words from that first night. "Don't leave me." It wasn't just for then. It was for her, for the life she led alone. And I wondered if I was part of it now, whether I wanted to be or not. The rain hammered back hard one Friday evening, a week after Sienna left the hospital. I was used to Seattle's drizzle, but this was different. Sheets of water lashing my windows, wind howling like it aimed to tear the city apart. I was warming leftovers when I noticed her lights still on late. It wasn't odd she'd mentioned burning the midnight oil on design projects, but unease crept in, the same as that night with the thuds. I grabbed a bottle of cold medicine I'd bought earlier, remembering she still felt off. Perfect excuse to check. I knocked, the sharp rap lost in the storm's roar. No answer at first, so I knocked harder. "Sienna, you okay?" I shouted, voice barely cutting through the rain. The door cracked open with a creak, and there she stood in the dim living room. No sharp coat or sleek ponytail tonight. Oversized sweater, gray joggers, blanket draped over her shoulders, hair tousled, strands across her face, eyes red like she'd cried or fought off exhaustion. She looked smaller than ever, like the strength she usually wore had cracked under some heavier load. "Miles," she said, voice tentative, "what are you doing here?" "Brought you this," I replied, holding up the bottle. "You said you were still feeling weak. Wanted to make sure you weren't, passing out again." I tried for a joke, but it fell flat, too clumsy to reach her. She stepped aside to let me in. "You're too kind," she murmured, almost accusing. But gratitude flickered in her eyes. Her place was tidy but alive. Furniture sketches scattered on the coffee table, half-empty tea mug on the counter. She sank onto the couch, pulling the blanket tighter. I set the medicine down, hesitating. "You sure you're okay?" I asked. "You don't look great." She gave a dry laugh, tucking a strand behind her ear. "Thanks for the pep talk." But the humor faded fast, and she turned to the window, rain streaking the glass. "I'm just tired," she said. "Long week. Long everything. I didn't push. I'd learned Sienna didn't open easily. Her walls had reasons. Instead, I grabbed a glass from her kitchen, filled it with water, and handed it over with the meds. "Take this," I said, "and try sleeping before you turn into a zombie." She took the glass, fingers grazing mine for a beat. Our eyes met, and she held mine longer than usual, searching for something. That pull hit me again, the one growing with every encounter. The one I'd convinced myself was just neighborly concern. But it wasn't anymore. She set the glass down untouched, hands folding in her lap. Silence stretched, thick with the rain outside and the unsaid between us. "Miles," she whispered finally, so low I almost missed it. "You're the first person I've let in here without wanting to kick them out." The words came slow, pulled from some buried depth. I've spent years keeping people at arm's length. It's simpler that way. But you keep showing up, and I don't know what to do with it. It's too much. I froze, heart pounding. Her eyes pinned me, raw and unguarded, like she'd stripped away every layer she usually hid. "Don't be too good to me," she added, voice cracking just enough to betray her. I don't know how to handle it. For a moment, I was speechless. My mind raced through every small beat. The night I rammed her door, coffee in her kitchen, the way she looked at me like I was more than a neighbor. I wanted to say I wasn't trying to be anything special, that I was here because I couldn't not be. But words felt too small. Instead, I sat on the couch, close enough to feel her blanket's warmth but far enough to give space. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, voice steadier than I felt. "Unless you tell me to." She looked at me, eyes gleaming in the low light, and for the first time, I saw her ease. She leaned back, head against the cushions, her shoulder brushing mine without pulling away. The rain drummed on, a steady rhythm anchoring us. We didn't talk, but the quiet wasn't empty. It brimmed with what we weren't ready to name, what we were starting to feel. We stayed like that for what felt like hours. Her breathing slowed, tension melting from her shoulders. I felt her weight beside me, the silent trust in not shifting away. It wasn't a kiss, not a confession. It was quieter, but heavier, like we'd crossed an irreversible line. And for now, that was enough. The morning after that rainy night, the storm had eased, leaving a damp gray mist over Seattle. I woke on my couch, neck stiff from dozing through Netflix. Sienna's words still weighed on me. "You're the first person I haven't wanted to kick out." Her voice, raw and honest, had followed me home, seeping into my thoughts like the rain clinging to the panes. I brewed coffee, trying to shake the sense that something had shifted not just between us, but in me. I wasn't just the guy who'd broken her door anymore. I was someone she'd let in, and it floored me. Around mid-morning, a soft knock at my door. It was Sienna in the hall, paper latte cup in hand, hair pulled back but still a bit messy, like she hadn't bothered to tame it. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, but her eyes sparkled more than the night before, less shadowed. "Brought you this," she said, offering the cup. "I owed you for the meds, and, for not running." I took it, our fingers brushing, and grinned. "You didn't have to," I replied, stepping aside. "But I'm not complaining." She stepped into my place, eyeing the bare walls and mismatched furniture. "Not big on decor, huh?" she teased, a lightness in her tone. It was her first time here, and it felt odd, like she was seeing a side of me I hadn't planned to show. "Yeah, well, boxes don't leave much time for interior design," I shot back, leaning on the counter. We sipped our coffees, the quiet easy but loaded, like we both waited for the other to touch on the night before. I wanted to ask what she meant, if it was real, but I didn't know how to start without pushing. She spoke first, setting her cup down. "I'm not good at this," she said, voice low but sure, letting people in. "After the divorce, I built this wall, kept everyone out. It was easier." She met my eyes, searching. "But you, Miles, you keep coming back, and I don't know what to do with it." I nodded, throat tight. "I'm not trying to complicate your life," I said. "I just see you, and I don't want you feeling alone in that apartment." Her lips parted like to reply, but she looked down, fingers tracing her cup's rim. Then, slowly, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small key, placing it on the counter between us. "For my place," she murmured, barely audible, "in case I crash again, or whatever, so you won't have to break the door next time." I stared at the key, its silver glint catching the light. It wasn't just metal, it was an invitation, a crack in the wall she'd built for years. I didn't grab it right away, afraid to shatter the moment. "You sure?" I asked, meeting her gaze. She nodded, a shy, almost bashful smile forming. "I'm sure, but don't get ideas. I'm still figuring this out." I laughed, tension breaking. "No ideas here," I said, but my heart thudded. I pocketed the key. Its weight felt heavier than it should. We finished our coffees over light talk, her latest design project, my failed attempts at cooking beyond instant noodles. But the air had shifted, like we'd stepped over another threshold without saying it. When she left, I lingered at my door, watching her head back to hers. She turned before closing, giving a small wave, her smile softer than ever. I went inside, the key burning in my pocket, and sank onto the couch, staring at the blank TV screen. I didn't know where this led, if anywhere. But for the first time in ages, my days didn't feel adrift. Sienna wasn't just my neighbor anymore. She was someone who'd opened her door to me, and I wasn't sure I wanted to leave. As I sat there, rain picking up outside, I thought back to that night I'd rammed her door. The way she'd looked at me, like I was the only thing stopping her from fading. Whatever this was, a friendship, something more, or a bond we hadn't named yet, it was real. And for now, that was enough. In the twists of everyday life, where Seattle's endless rains or those in our own hearts trap us in cocoons of solitude, a profound lesson breaks through like sunlight-piercing clouds. The power of breaking down the walls we build, not with force, but with instinctive compassion that turns strangers into unbreakable bonds. Picture Miles, this 25-year-old guy caught in the grind of warehouse shifts and a silent apartment, hearing a thud through the shared wall. Instead of shrugging it off, he acts. He shoulders in the door, dives into the unknown, and finds Sienna collapsed, vulnerable, her eyes pleading for an anchor in the chaos. That impulsive move, born from gut instinct, isn't just a physical rescue. It spins into the thread of human connection woven from shared coffees, knowing silences, and keys slipped under mats like whispered promises. This tale reminds us that true strength lies in shared vulnerability. Sienna, with her 42 years of divorce scars and flawless facades, mirrors so many of us. Souls tough on the outside, but gnawed by a loneliness that whispers, "Don't leave me" in rainy nights. Miles, in turn, learns that empathy isn't a burden, it's a bridge to a fuller life, where small acts, a hauled trash bag, a steaming latte, erode barriers, and uncover hearts starved for closeness. In our hyper-connected yet fractured world, where neighbors fade to anonymous shadows, this lesson calls to us. Listen to the silences beyond the walls. Offer your shoulder before it's asked, and dare to step into others' lives. Because behind every locked door isn't an intrusion, it's a chance to heal, to love, to remember we're never truly alone. Let that feeling wash over you, like a cleansing downpour. It rinses fears and waters the seeds of hope. If this story struck a chord, if it made you reflect on those moments when an unexpected gesture shifted your path, share in the comments the most precious lesson life has handed you. Maybe a "don't leave me" you've whispered or heard. And to catch every tale that warms the soul and sparks the everyday, subscribe to the channel right now. Together, let's break doors, open hearts, and build a world a little less rainy. See you soon for the next shared emotion.